The word myth comes from the Greek language and it means to count, to tell, or to relate something to others. It's a set of stories about the origins of aspects and events, even the origin of the world and everything in it. It's also the way to explain things that we simply don't know how to explain. For example, people used to believe that a storm in the sea was the fury of Neptune, since they didn't have a scientific explanation for that at the time.
To make a movie about myths, we can think of some ways to create a narrative. For example, the relationships between gods which have a consequence, just like the story of Eros. In the birth of Athens, there was a big feast, and Creutus's son, Poros, who was very rich, was just finishing his dinner and was drunk. Pinia, who represented poorness, was in the garden begging for gold. She saw Poros lying down and decided to flirt with him. So, from the relationship of poorness and richness, accidentally Eros, love, also known as Cupid, was born. And he's also responsible for making people fall in love and often makes a mess with others' feelings.
We can say that there is another way to tell a myth because gods can fall in love but can also have rivalry, like in the city Troy, found in the book of Iliad.
Ares wasn't invited to the wedding of Peleo and Thetis, so she put an apple that had "to the most beautiful" written on it. 3 goddesses were fighting for the title, and Paria was chosen to judge it. Hera promised him richness, Athena promised him knowledge, and Aphrodite the love of the most beautiful woman in trade for the title.
Paris chose to give it to Aphrodite in order to fall in love with the most beautiful woman, Helena, who was Menelaus' daughter. Paris and Helena ran away to Troy. Menelaus was furious, and because of that, he had enough reasons to begin a war. But the stories aren't only about gods. There are myths that tell the story of reward and punishment to humans, like Prometheus, the man who stole the fire in order to give it to the humans.
Zeus, of course, didn't like it, so he chained him to a rock with a big bird that would come every afternoon to eat his liver. Gods have a strange sense of humor, so sometimes all mankind can pay for a small mistake made by one person.
As you can notice, there are some elements in common in each narrative that you can use in your story.
So let's talk about them and quote a few more. First of all, we have him, the hero, the one who's going to develop himself during the narrative. He can transform himself or transform the others, and there is always an adventure waiting for him. He can have superpowers or not, but he also has faults and some characteristics that make him unique.
The hero doesn't do everything all by himself. He has a guide to help, to orientate, or to give him some assets for the adventure. Generally, he's someone older with more experience in some specific abilities. He is the one who tells what kind of dangers are waiting for the hero and what kind of situations he's going to go through.
The mentor prepares the hero for the adventure, but we have someone to invite him to it. That's the messenger, the character who connects the hero with the first steps of the journey. Sometimes the messenger becomes the mentor or even the villain.
Every hero has to prove that he is prepared to confront his final test. And of course, there is someone to test him before the final battle. We are talking about the guardian of the threshold. He can work for the villain or just be in the way of the hero, creating an obstacle. Generally, if the hero defeats the guardian of the threshold, he is ready for the final confrontation.
Like people in real life, characters can also have problems with their personalities. They don't always let the spectator be sure about their side, so we never know exactly if they are good or evil, and that's the chameleon.
Humor is always a good element in the narrative. It may come as some characteristic of the hero, some lines, or even as a character known as PIKARO. He usually represents something to ease the tension and to make everything run more pleasantly.
In order for the adventure to take place, there must be something wrong in the world, something that makes the hero get out of his house and confront all the obstacles which are waiting for him. The character that makes this kind of mess is the shadow. He's usually the villain of the story. The final confrontation of the story is normally a battle between the villain and the hero. There are two opposite forces that represent everything that we have of good and evil. Generally, the good prevails, but remember, generally is not always.
These are the points to be considered to make a narrative about myths, and as we know it, nowadays we have a lot of stories created using some elements of mythologies, such as mythological animals and legendary guns, or adapting some story or character to the modern world. There are a lot of myths being created nowadays, and mythical elements can add a great atmosphere to the narrative.